Welcome back to Talk Tickers. You know we love to dig into those earnings calls, and today we're diving into Land's End.
Land's End.
Recent Q3 2024 report.
All right.
We've got the transcript handy and the stock info, so let's get into it and figure out what these numbers really mean.
Yeah, I think, there's always more to it than just the headlines, right? What's kind of the story?
What's the strategy?
The why behind the what?
Exactly.
So to kick things off, the stock took a bit of a dip after this call, down about 13% for the day.
Oof, yeah.
I was looking at that LE stock PDF file you sent over, and it seemed like a pretty sharp reaction.
Yeah, it is a notable drop, especially when you consider that Land's End is actually up significantly for the year.
Right.
Overall. So, the market can be fickle like that.
For sure.
But
yeah.
What's interesting is that dip came despite some positive points in the call, like improved profitability.
So that's what makes me wonder why the drop then. Was there something in the transcript that spooked investors? Well, they did announce a surprise loss for the quarter, which never sits well with investors. But they also pointed to some strategic shifts that might explain things like a move towards more licensing agreements.
Licensing, so like other companies use their name and designs.
Exactly.
How does that play into their overall performance?
Yeah, so it appears they're focusing more on licensing, particularly for their kids and footwear lines.
Okay.
And this shift seems to be impacting their revenue, which was down slightly.
Okay.
But this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
If we look at their gross merchandise value, or GMV, which includes those licensed sales,
right,
it actually grew by double digits.
So hold on, break that down for me a little bit. What is GMV? Some of our listeners might not be familiar with that term.
Yeah, sure. Think of GMV as the total value of all merchandise sold,
okay,
including sales made through these licensing deals. So it's a good way to gauge overall brand performance.
Okay.
Even if the company's direct sales might be fluctuating.
So even though revenue from Land's End's own stores might be down, the brand is still doing well overall because of these licensing deals.
Precisely. And it seems this is a very deliberate strategy from Land's End.
Okay.
They highlighted a 20% jump in new customer acquisition during the call.
20% increase. That's huge.
Yeah.
How are they attracting all these new customers?
It seems they're walking a tightrope. They're trying to attract a younger demographic.
Right.
With some more fashion-forward pieces, think updated classics, like their iconic starfish pants getting a modern makeover.
So appealing to the TikTok generation without alienating their loyal, more traditional customer base.
Right. It's a tough balance to strike.
Is it working?
Well, the new customer numbers are certainly promising, and they're being very deliberate about not getting sucked into the race to the bottom with constant promotions,
Yeah.
Instead, they're focusing on quality sales and expanding those profit margins.
And did that approach pay off?
Well, it seems so. Their gross margin for Q3 was the highest in the company's history.
Wow. Impressive. So it sounds like they're making some pretty savvy moves behind the scenes. But what about the overall strategy? Like, what is Land's End doing beyond just these financial figures?
Well, for starters, they're pushing further into these licensing agreements, expanding into new categories, and even hinting at potential international deals.
Interesting.
Think home goods in 2025, maybe even Land's End sweaters in Parisian boutiques.
Parisian boutiques?
No, right?
That's an image.
It is.
So are they really thinking globally? Is that part of the plan?
They did specifically mention exploring international expansion during the call.
Okay.
So it seems they're at least considering it. And they're also leveraging those third-party marketplace partnerships, like the one with Nordstrom, to reach new customers.
That's smart. Getting their products in front of a whole new audience without having to build their own stores.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. What else caught your eye in this transcript?
Well, their approach to inventory management was quite remarkable. They've reduced their inventory levels by 20% year over year.
Really?
Giving them more flexibility and mitigating risk.
Inventory management is huge in retail.
Yeah.
What's their secret sauce? How are they managing to reduce by that much?
Part of it comes from shifting manufacturing closer to home.
Okay.
Lessening their reliance on China.
Interesting.
They're also focused on what they call buying closer to trend and turning over inventory faster.
Buying closer to trend, what does that mean?
Basically, they're trying to anticipate trends more accurately.
Okay.
And buy merchandise accordingly. This allows them to be more responsive to changing customer preferences and avoid getting stuck with a bunch of outdated stock.
So instead of buying huge quantities months in advance, they're being more strategic and nimble.
Exactly.
And for you, the listener, this means you're more likely to find fresh, in-demand styles at Land's End rather than last season's leftovers.
Yeah.
It's all about staying ahead of the curve. So it sounds like Land's End is really trying to shake things up and modernize their approach. But are these changes enough to turn the tide?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? They're definitely making bold moves.
Yeah.
And we're seeing those positive signs in terms of profitability and new customer acquisition. But there are still some key questions looming.
Like what are the potential pitfalls or challenges they might face?
Well, one big question is whether they can keep those new customers happy while keeping their loyal base on board.
Right.
Sometimes big changes can alienate existing customers.
That makes sense. And what about all these licensing deals? Could that dilute their brand image over time?
It's a valid concern. They'll need to be very careful about who they partner with.
Right.
And ensure quality control across the board.
And let's not forget about the potential challenges of international expansion. Different markets have different tastes, and what works in the U.S. might not translate overseas.
Absolutely. Navigating those cultural nuances and logistical hurdles will be critical if they choose to go global.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Land's End is clearly in transition, and it'll be fascinating to see how these strategic moves play out. But you know what we always say on Talk Tickers?
This is not financial advice.
Exactly. We're just having a fun speculative conversation here. Don't make any investment decisions based solely on what you hear on this podcast. But that being said, let's have a little fun and cook up a crazy but plausible trade idea.
All right.
Based on Land's End's potential future. What if?
What if those international licensing deals really take off? I mean, picture the Land's End sweaters in Tokyo, their swimwear on the beaches of Rio global domination.
Okay, I'm already hooked. I like this. So they're classic American style, but with maybe a little local flair for each market.
Right.
It's kind of brilliant when you think about it.
It is, and they already have that brand recognition built in. People know Land's End stands for quality and timeless design.
Right.
That could be a major selling point in markets that are looking for alternatives to fast fashion.
But I'm seeing it now, Land's End parkas in London. They're home goods in those chic Parisian apartments.
Yeah.
But wouldn't global expansion be a massive undertaking? I mean, that's not exactly a walk in the park.
True, but they're already laying the groundwork.
Yeah.
Those international licensing agreements they mentioned, that's a low-risk way to test the waters in new markets. And they've got experience with licensing already, so it's not like they're starting from scratch.
Plus, they wouldn't have to deal with the headaches of setting up their own stores and distribution networks in all these new countries. They could leverage their partners' existing infrastructure.
Exactly. They'd be tapping into local expertise and existing customer bases. It's a much leaner approach than trying to go it alone.
Okay, you've convinced me there's definitely some potential here. So let's get to the good stuff. What's our crazy, this is not financial advice trade idea?
Well, let's imagine a scenario where this international expansion goes gangbusters.
Okay.
Demand for Land's End products skyrockets overseas. Their brand becomes the hottest thing since, well, you pick the analogy.
Let's say the hottest thing since avocado toast. Everyone's got to have it.
I like it.
And Land's End is suddenly the brand to be seen in.
Okay, perfect. So in this hypothetical scenario, we're obviously going along on Land's End.
Okay.
But we're not just buying stock. We're going all in with...
Yeah, Land's is long-term call options, right? Betting big that the stock price is going to soar as this global expansion plays out. This is getting risky. I like it.
High risk, high reward, as they say. But remember, folks, this is not financial advice. We're just having some fun, exploring the possibilities. Don't base any real investment decisions on our whimsical daydreams.
Right. This is purely for entertainment purposes.
Exactly.
But hey, it's fun to imagine sipping cocktails on a beach somewhere, all thanks to our genius Land's End investment.
Now back to reality for a moment.
Okay.
Let's recap what we've learned from this deep dive into Land's End's Q3 report.
All right. So they're clearly shaking things up,
Yeah.
making strategic moves to attract new customers, boost profitability, and potentially expand their global reach. It's fascinating to see a company like Land's End, known for its classic style, embrace such bold changes
The big question is whether they can maintain this momentum
Yeah.
while navigating the challenges that come with any major transition.
Sure.
Balancing the needs of new and existing customers, managing those licensing agreements, and potentially cracking the code on international expansion. These are all things to watch closely in the coming quarters.
It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure. But that's what makes following these companies so interesting.
Yeah.
There's always something new happening, always a new chapter unfolding.
And that's why we love doing this show.
Absolutely.
We get to dive into these earnings calls, dissect the numbers, and explore the possibilities with you, our listeners.
So whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, we hope these deep dives give you some food for thought and help you stay informed about the companies shaping our world.
Stay curious, stay informed, and always do your own research.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll wrap up part 1 of this episode of Talk Tickers. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Land's End. Until next time.
See ya. See ya.
Happy investing.
See ya.
Happy investing. And we're back with part 3 of Talk Ticker's deep dive into Land's End.
All right, picking up where we left off.
Exactly. So, we were just having some fun in that last segment, cooking up our outrageous but plausible trade idea based on Land's End going global.
Right. Hypothetical, of course.
Of course, always.
Never financial advice.
But hey, it's fun to dream, right? What if Land's End becomes this international sensation?
Yeah, the next big thing, people clamoring for those cozy sweaters and those stylish swimwear.
And it all started with that savvy licensing strategy.
Right. Plant those seeds, watch them grow.
Exactly. So for those of you just tuning in, remember we're talking about Land's End's Q3 2024 earnings call. And what we see is their potential for the future.
Yeah, they're making some really interesting moves, focusing on profitability, attracting new customers, and really honing in on their inventory management.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to shake things up a little bit.
Not at all, which is refreshing to see.
Definitely.
They're not resting on their laurels. They're actively adapting to the changing retail landscape.
And that's what we love to see, right? Companies that are willing to evolve and try new things.
Absolutely. It's all about staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Land's End, what are your key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the main thing is that Land's End is a company in transition. They're not the same old Land's End we might remember from a few years ago.
Right.
They're making bold moves, and it'll be really interesting to see how these strategies play out in the long run.
Absolutely. And remember, folks, this is just our take on their earnings call. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions.
Couldn't agree more.
But hey, it's always fun to speculate and dream a little, right?
No, absolutely. That's part of the fun of investing.
Exactly. All right, well, that's it for this episode of Talk Tickers.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the world of earnings calls. Until then, happy investing, everybody.